What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video here on Mets Central, and today we're going to go over 10 reliever options for the New York Mets to potentially acquire at this year's deadline. Of course, if they end up buying. Before we jump into everything, please be sure to leave a like on the video if you enjoy it, subscribe if you guys are new, especially if you're a Met fan, and turn on your notifications so you know I upload or go live. I'm going to say off the rip, I'm not claiming every single one of these guys are available because some of them do have control for the next season or two, or maybe even longer. But all I know is that the Mets should at least take phone calls. And who's to say they can't get relievers with control on them? Because it would be very nice if they could find some arms with control. But first up, let's always say more time. Former Met Justin Wilson. You look at the baseline numbers, 4.38 ERA in 33 games played, 1.38 whip, and you're like, yeah, that's really not that great. 24.2 innings pitched. You look at stuff like that and you say not great, but then you look at the underlying stuff like expected ERA, expected batting average. His fastball velo is actually surprisingly solid considering he was 36 and coming back from a major injury. And then everything is pretty good, number one. Number two, he's an upgrade over Jake Diekman. This team needs a lefty desperately, so I'm willing to roll the dice there. Has a nice 4-pitch mix. Doesn't really use the split finger that much, as you can see, but he does have a 4-pitch mix if, again, he does decide to utilize it. He uses that 4-seam heavily, and honestly, the 4-seam, I don't know what it is, but for some reason, teams are teeing off of the 4-seam, even though the expected batting average is 189, and then the actual is 304. It just makes no sense at all, any of these numbers. And then we're going to look as well, and like even some of the pitchers he's comparable to from some of these seasons, really not that bad. I know Diaz wasn't great in 2017. Steven Matz was okay in 2016, had some injuries. Castillo, though, solid. Again, there's some weird things with Justin Wilson. And then you get to the Fangraph stuff, and he is, I want to actually see if I could fix this because it's not showing everything here on the screen, but he is, there we go. He is actually a positive WAR player, which I should move this. He's a positive WAR player at 0.5, as you could barely see there, but his ERA, like I said, 4.38, but his FIP is at 3.28, so it does show he's getting a little bit unlucky, and he does play in a very hitter-friendly ballpark, which I do think plays a factor in the fact that his numbers aren't as good as they possibly could be. He has a 10.9 Ks per 9. I'm at the very least, like I said, I think the Mets have to the very least explore the option of potentially bringing back Justin Wilson. I don't know what it would cost to get him, but again, does not hurt to make a phone call, and that's the case with all these guys. Moving on, we have Garrett Clevenger of the Tampa Bay Rays. I don't know at all, and I don't think he's going to be available, to be honest, because he does have some control left, but the Rays do like to make weird moves, and if they could pull off a fleece, they'll do it. But again, another guy who's a lefty, and I would love for the Mets to get him in. Why? Because he's a lefty that throws some absolute gas. Does have a little bit of a walk issue, which could be some Jake Diekman hangover to some fans. But again, like that's really the case with a lot of relievers is walk issues, which is why I liked Justin Wilson potentially as an option. But Garrett Clevenger still would be a very good add. His baseline numbers are okay this year: 3.52 ERA, 1.36 WHIP. Really not that great, not that, elite and stuff. Does have 5 pitches that he could throw, so it would be interesting to have this sort of stuff coming out of the pen. He has a cutter, which he utilizes the most, a 4-seam, sweeper, slider, sinker combination. So, again, a lot of different pitches there. His cutter is his put-away pitch, or no. I have to sort that. Put-away pitch is his slider, actually. So, interesting. At 26.5%. What was I looking at before? I think it was just that. Yeah, I might have read that wrong with Wilson before, but he does utilize, it looks like, that cutter a lot, and the numbers against it really aren't, against all of his pitches, like they really aren't that bad outside of his cutter, which he is allowing probably the most contact with, which again, it's weird that a lot of it is whatever pitch is being utilized the most, but it also makes sense because if you're using it so much, probably going to be a lot of hits off of it. But in terms of pitcher comparables, you have Strider, Tanner Scott, Brian Abreu, Gregory Soto. Really not a bad, and David Bednar. Really not a bad group to be in at all. 0.2 WAR, 3.66 FIP. So his FIP is higher than his ERA. That doesn't really scare me. Again, another guy that I don't think he's going to get moved, but it's worth making a phone call. I do think Wilson, though, is more likely, I should say, but doesn't hurt to look. Next up, we have Andrew Chafin, and I hate talking about Andrew Chafin because it feels like every year we have this conversation and it just never happens. But again, we'll go over him just briefly because of the fact that we do this every single year with him. Guy that doesn't really have his fastball velocity a lot this year, but in terms of chase and whiff stuff, strikeout numbers, very good stuff there. 1.53 whip, 3.66 ERA against. Does have a save this year in 32 innings pitch. Does have a 3-pitch mix, slider, sinker, four-seam. Really wouldn't be a bad option at all. And then if you want to look at some of the Fangraph stuff, his FIP is sitting at 2.82, so it shows he's getting unlucky in terms of the ERA stuff. 0.6 WAR. Again, is he available? I don't know. He probably will be because the Tigers likely aren't making the playoffs, and they probably are going to want to get something for Chafin. But if he likes Detroit, then maybe not. But all I know is that I don't think it's going to happen because we have this conversation every single year about him, and it never happens. But, you know, a change in management maybe changes it. Next, we have probably one of my least favorite options, but I thought I'd go over him anyway, in Brendan Little of the Toronto Blue Jays. And the reason why I'm going over him in the first place is just because it's a lefty, it's a body to maybe get in here, and maybe you find a diamond in the rough here because some of his stuff is a little intriguing. A guy that generates a lot of ground balls and with a good defense behind him. I really don't think that's the worst idea if you do get a ground ball pitcher in here. The problem is, though, if he's allowing hard contact, which could happen somewhat often, then it's more likely than not going to be a big problem for him. He utilizes a sinker, knuckle curve, and a cutter. So an interesting little pitch mix there. His put away pitch is mostly his cutter, but he's also not throwing it a lot. But the numbers against his sinker are very alarming. The other pitches, not terrible. I mean, his knuckle curve is really good. Cutter, you'd like to see better numbers, but his sinker gets just absolutely beat up a lot. And then in terms of some of the other stuff, his FIP, 4.31, 4.50 ERA, like I mentioned. Is it the sexiest option? No, but the Blue Jays are going to look to sell. And again, I don't hate the idea of adding a body at the very least. I'd prefer for him to be in AAA if the Mets were to get him, and then God forbid you have injuries, you call a guy like this up. But again, just another body, another name to throw in the mix there. Now moving on to a lefty that I am very interested in. That is Tanner Banks of the Chicago White Sox. And the White Sox will definitely move Tanner Banks because they got to get something for literally any of these guys that are... Anyone that's above the age 26 or so, the White Sox should explore moving. And that's no exception to Tanner Banks. And some of his stuff, again, you don't love some of the stuff like the fastball velo and stuff. But you do like the fact that he does not walk a lot of batters, which again would be very welcoming in a bullpen that does have a lot of guys that walk batters. In terms of some of the other stuff, like I said, doesn't allow a lot of hard contact, to be honest with you, which is also really nice. 1.24 whip, 4.33 ERA in terms of the baseline stuff. Has a lot of pitches that he utilizes, a slider, four-seam, changeup, curveball, sinker. So you add a lot into the pen. Has some pretty good company in terms of pitcher comparables. Nothing too off the charts, but again, some interesting names there, especially you look at like a Julio Urias, not a good person, but just in terms of, pitcher, that regard. But slider is his most used pitch, and it does get beat up quite a bit. But his four-seam, if he could come here and start utilizing it more, maybe a smart organization will get him to utilize his four-seam more. I don't know if Hefner's profile there, but I know Alvarez could call a good game, and you get Alvarez behind the plate. Maybe he's inclined to use the four-seam more, which is working for him. But in terms of the Fangraph stuff, 3.34 FIP. So again, shows he's getting unlucky, a positive WAR guy. I'd like to see the Mets acquire a guy like Tanner Banks if possible. But again, that goes for pretty much all these guys, because to be honest with you, any of these guys would help a bullpen that absolutely blows right now. But moving on, we got Ryan Walker of the San Francisco Giants. This is like, if there's a world where the Mets could get Ryan Walker, I would be ecstatic, because this is, I mean, do I need to say more other than the amount of red here on the Fangraphs chart? The problem is he does have a couple of years of control, which could hurt the Mets in potentially acquiring him. But I'm trying to figure out why this guy is not the Giants closer. He has a .89 whip, a 2.32 ERA. And again, I don't have to explain anything. Look at the amount of red here, except for extension, which who the hell cares? Has literally throws like 2 pitches, has a 4-seam, doesn't utilize it that much, but has a very good sinker, has a very good slider. I mean, do I need to say more other than these numbers here? And then you look at some of the pitcher comparables. Chris Sale this year, Jack Flaherty, which by the way, just having casually one of the best seasons ever. Camilo Duvall, teammate there. Like, there is no reason if Ryan Walker becomes available that the Mets shouldn't be interested. Like, it's just ridiculous, his numbers. 2.43 FIP. Over 1 WAR for a relief pitcher also is just absolutely absurd. Doesn't allow home runs. Like, what more? Strikes everyone and their mother out. What more do you want from a relief pitcher? And this is a guy that would be able to get high leverage spots. Like, I'd be very interested. I don't know if he's utilized in lower leverage spots or what, but he's a guy that should be utilized in high leverage spots if he's not, which again, he doesn't get save opportunities. So maybe he's not. If David Stearns could pull this off, I would be absolutely in love. Do I think it's going to happen? Probably not. But again, if he's available, please make it happen somehow. But moving on to a David Stearns client, or I shouldn't say client because it's not like it's an agent type deal, but a former David Stearns player. We have Brent Suter of the Cincinnati Reds. 3.73 ERA, 1.20 whip. Some of the stuff you don't like, he does chuck meatballs, to be honest with you. Does not walk a lot of batters, so that is a positive there. The problem is that means he's leaving some stuff over the plate, which really isn't great at all. Does have 4 pitches that he uses, 4-seam, sinker, changeup, slider. In terms of comparisons, like meh pitcher comparables, but I don't know. Like, I don't love the idea of getting Brent Suter, but it is technically an upgrade over what you have. I mean, the 4.35 FIP, and he's playing for a team that plays in a pitcher-friendly park. I don't love it, but again, I don't know. I'm just throwing names out there, and I think it's possible just because of the Stearns connection. Doesn't strike a lot of batters out, but, and again, doesn't really walk a lot, but the home run per 9 numbers is just really gross. But we'll move on. Another option I don't love, but we'll move on to one of the big names, and now we're moving just strictly the big names, which I don't think the Mets are going to be in the market for any of these big names, just because I don't think they want to give up the type of assets that it would cost. But we have Tanner Scott of the Miami Marlins, and I don't think I have to say much other than the guy throws heat. He's a left-handed arm, which would really help the Mets because they've been missing Brooks really so much. And the biggest gripe with him is that he walks a lot of batters. But outside of that, he's doing pretty much everything right with his 2-pitch arsenal of a 4-seam and slider. And in terms of the pitcher comparables, pretty good company here. Really not much to introduce with Tanner Scott. Again, you could say if there's anything to be worried about, his FIP, 3.43, could show he's getting a little bit lucky. But again, the walks, you just want to vomit at the walk stuff. But doesn't allow a lot of home runs, strikes guys out. You tell me. Again, I don't like the idea of giving up premium assets for a reliever, but Tanner Scott is maybe an exception there where it would make sense. But I need to see still for him and the last 2 guys I'm going to mention. I really want to see the Mets go on a run before I'm sold on the idea of getting guys like this. But we'll move on to the next one, and that is a reunion with David Robertson, who, again, last year was a Met and was pretty good. And there's really not a lot to talk about with him because we know what he is, a guy that could pitch in high leverage spots, strikes guys out. Does have a little bit of an issue in terms of the amount of, hard hit balls that he's letting out every now and then. We know the pitch arsenal and stuff, but again, there's really not a lot to dissect here with David Robertson, which I don't know why it's This, I didn't want to look at his splits. Gotta fix that. I did not want to look at split stuff there. I want to look at his base page. But yeah, still having a very solid year with the Texas Rangers. I mean, a positive WAR guy, 2.23 FIP. I mean, 13.5 Ks per nine is just absurd. The only thing I worry about is just how bad he was with the Marlins last year when he got traded there. Does that mean it's going to happen again if he gets traded? I don't know. But again, it's just he's going to cost a premium, which also just worries me. And he is 39 years old. There are things to be worried about with David Robertson, but I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't be a fan of the idea of a reunion. And last of all, we got Kirby Yates, who out of nowhere at age 37 is just having a unbelievable season, a 1.5 or 1.05 ERA, 0.9 whip. Really good stuff. Yet again, the fastball velo, not great. Does walk some batters. But outside of that, there's a lot of things to love. Mostly uses a four seam and split finger. And just out of nowhere, again, having a unbelievable year. Compared to Trevor May in 2018, Iglesias, like these are solid names. 2018 Chris Sale, pretty solid names to be in company with. And then you look at some of the other stuff here on Fangraphs, a 1.88 FIP, so a little higher than his ERA, but oh no, just 1.88, scary. Strikes out a lot of batters. Again, walks are an issue. Does not allow the long ball though at all. I would like Kirby Yates, but he falls in the category where again, he's gonna cost a premium because he's a hot commodity, and a lot of it is name based there. So will they get him? I don't know. But either way, I figure I would go down and dissect a couple of relief pitchers for the Mets to maybe target this year. Let me know your favorite, though, out of the ones I named in the comment section down below. Don't forget to leave a like if you haven't already. Don't forget to subscribe. Turn on your notifications so you know when I upload or go live next. And I'll see you guys in the next one.